Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are entering a period of uncertainty and unpredictability, especially a divided nation called South Korea is facing a lot of challenges and uncertainties to be solved by ourselves. At this junction, Robert Cohen and Joseph Nye, international political scholar, wrote an article in a Foreign Affairs magazine with the title of The End of the Long American Century, Trump and the Sources of US Power. So they are criticizing Donald Trump's approach based on unilateralism and aggressive mode by saying that he began his second term by brandishing American hard power, threatening Denmark over the control of Greenland, suggesting he would take back the Panama Canal. He also successfully wielded the threat of punitive tariffs to coerce Canada, Colombia, and Mexico on immigration issues. He also withdrew from the Paris Climate Accord and the World Health Organization. In April, he sent the global market into chaos by announcing sweeping tariffs on countries all over the world. He changed tack not long after, withdrawing most of the additional tariffs, although continuing to press a trade war with China, the central front in his current offensive against Washington's main rival. We all understand that other countries rely on the buying power of the enormous American market and on the certainties of American military might. These advantages give Washington the leeway to strong-arm its partners. His positions are consistent with an argument we made almost 50 years ago. Still, Trump lament the United States' significant trade deficit with China, but he also seems to understand that this imbalance gives Washington tremendous leverage over Beijing. So, a lot of conflict and a lot of unhappy news based on reciprocity tariffs imposed on other countries. By assailing interdependence, he undercut the very foundation of American power. The power associated with the trade is hard power based on material capabilities. But over the past 80 years, the United States has accumulated soft power based on attraction rather than coercion or the imposition of a cost, something like that. The continuation of Trump's current foreign policy would weaken the United States and accelerate the erosion of the international order that since the World War II has served so many countries well, most of all the United States. Actually, South Korea is at the top of this kind of countries who are served by the international order. We know that order rests on a stable distribution of power among states, norms that influence and legitimize the conduct of state, and other actors and institutions that help underpin it. How are South Korea's position nowadays? So much worried. The Trump approach may be a plunge into murky waters. If we say something, In its erratic and misguided efforts to make the United States even more powerful, Trump may bring us in a period of dominance, what American publisher Henry Luce first called the American century to an unceremonious end. Unceremonious end, something like that. What are the deficit advantage, by doing this kind of things? We mentioned power and interdependence. Joseph Nye and Robert Cohen wrote Power and Interdependence in the year 1977. And their research, by contrast, explored how trade affected power. And they argued that asymmetry in an interdependent economic relationship empowers the less dependent actor. That's right. So South Korea's too much dependence on trade makes a lot of vulnerabilities to outer influences like strong tariffs. The deficit country, typically United States, after all, can impose tariffs or other trade barriers on the surplus country. That targeted surplus country will have difficulty retaliating because of its relative lack of import to sanction. So we know that trade is extremely asymmetric with China, Mexico, and the association of Southeast Asian nation, to the position of the United States. All of which have an export-import ratio of more than 2 to 1 with the United States. For Japan, roughly 1.8 to 1. South Korea, 1.4 to 1. And European Union, 1.6 to 1. Those ratios are also asymmetric. Canada enjoys a more balanced ratio of around 1.2 to 1, which means that reciprocal tariffs to Canada will be smaller than imposed on South Korea and other countries. So it is necessary to look carefully at countervailing factors that might diminish the advantages that would normally accrue to the deficit country. What could be the burdens that will be shaped into the shoulder of South Korean economy in the future? So many problems, we know that. The main target the United States is aiming at, especially China. China appears, weakest of all in the trade sector alone, with its 3 to 1 ratio of export to import. So China can also use hard power, such as cutting off supplies of rare minerals, as the two sides discover more precisely their mutual vulnerabilities by using rare earth materials, something like that. The focus of trade warfare will shift to reflect these learning processes. Trade sector is creating a lot of conflict because of the reciprocal tariffs by Donald Trump, especially in Asia. The asymmetry in the U.S. trade relations with Japan, South Korea, and the Association of Southeast Asian Nations is somewhat compensated for by the U.S. policy of rivalry with China. This is very important. We have some rooms to take advantage of, as long as this rivalry continues. The United States needs its East Asian and Southeast Asian allies and partners, and it cannot take a full advantage of its trade-derived leverage. The relative influence of U.S. trade policy, therefore, varies depending on the geopolitical context and on patterns of asymmetric interdependence. What is the real power? Concept of real power. Power is the ability to get others to do what you want. This goal can be accomplished by coercion, payment, or attraction. or attraction. Attraction is a desirable way of making others move into the direction we want. Skeptics say that, so what? International politics is hardball, not softball. And Trump's coercive and transactional approach is already producing concessions with the promise of more to come. As Machiavelli once wrote about power, it is better for a prince to be feared than to be loved. But it is better yet to be both feared and loved. Power has three dimensions, and by ignoring attraction, Trump is neglecting a key source of American strength. In the long run, it is a losing strategy. So Trump had better use more soft power, something like that. America's decline may not be a mere dip, but a plunge. So soft power matters even in the short run. In the long-term prospect, it matters more. Faced with bullying, they may comply, but if they see their trading partner as an unreliable bully, they are more likely to drag their feet and reduce their long-term interdependence when they can. When they can. Very difficult, problem to be solved. In Asia, we know that China has been increasing its hard military and economic investment, but it has also been cultivating its powers of attraction. For example, in 2007, President Hu Jintao told the 17th National Congress of the Chinese Communist Party that China needed to increase its soft power. The Chinese government has spent tens of billions of dollars to that end. They did that, but after Xi Jinping taking power from Hu Jintao, they more relied on hard power. This is true. According to a survey done by Pew surveyed 24 countries in 2023 and reported that a majority of respondents in most of them found the United States more attractive than China. It is true also because of universal values United States adheres to. With Africa, the only continent where the results were even close, because African countries are more influenced by Chinese influential operations. More recently, in May 2024, Gallup poll found that 133 countries is surveyed. The United States had the advantage in 81 countries, China in 52 countries. So if Trump keeps undercutting American soft power, however, these numbers may change markedly. But this assumption has all the problems because Chinese Communist Party is becoming more and more authoritarian and using more coercions, securing the national interest. To be sure, American soft power has had its ups and downs over the years. The United States was unpopular in many countries during the Vietnam War and the Iraq War, but soft power derives from a country's society and culture, not just the actions of its government. So soft power derived from American culture will not survive the excesses of the US government during the next few years if American democracy continues to erode and the country acts as a bully abroad, something like that. It sees itself as a leader of the so-called global South, China in case of China. China aims to displace the American order of international alliances and institutions. Its One Road and Belt Road infrastructure investment program is designed not only to attract other countries, but also to provide hard economic power. Has it successful? Has it successful? Partially successful, and In a overall analysis, many parts of the program have failed, I think. Globalization attracted a lot of countries to be more associated with those superpowers. Globalization has enhanced the American power, and Trump's assault on it only enfeebles the United States. It means that Trump needed to use more soft power. At the beginning of the 19th century, the British economist and statesman David Ricardo established the widely accepted fact that global trade can create value through comparative advantage. When they are open to trade, countries can specialize in what they do best. This pure theory still works, not 100%, but still works. Probably the United States has benefited most from the innovation that generate growth and spillover effect that growth has had around the world. Still, free trade are the most desirable directions of world trade. It is true. Also, according to the Joseph Nye and Robert Cohen, studies have shown that United States has lost and gained millions of jobs in the 21st century, forcing the cost of adjustment on the workers who have generally not received adequate compensation from the government. Technological change has also eliminated millions of jobs as machines have replaced people, and it is difficult to untangle the interconnected effect of automation and foreign trade. The usual strains of interdependence have been made much worse by China's export, juggernaut, which is not letting up. Even as economic globalization enhances the productivity of the world economy, these changes may be unwelcome for many individuals and families. The last several decades of globalization have been characterized by massive movement of people across the national borders, another major type of interdependence. Migration is culturally enriching and offers major economic benefit for countries that receive migrants by bringing people with skills to places where they can use those skills more productively. Actually, United States has been benefited by this kind of migration skills. But today we are watching CNNs and the BBC World, how Donald Trump is now expelling those illegal migrants in Californian region, some conflict there. Immigration has become the dominant populist political issue used against incumbent government in nearly all democracies in recent years. It fueled Trump election in 2016 and again in 2024. We all know that. So it is much easier for populist leaders to blame foreigners for economic upheaval than to accept the far more determinative roles of technological change and capital. Globalization has presented the challenges to incumbents in many recent elections in many countries. The pros and cons of globalization, not only in terms of political globalization, but in terms of economic globalization. So Donald Trump's assault on globalization enfeebles the United States. It is true that overall trade grew by about 4,400% from 1950 to 2023. Global trade could again lurch into decline if the US trade measures against China lead to a more committed trade war. It is likely to do a great deal of damage. Trade wars in general can easily morph into enduring and escalating conflict with the possibility of catastrophic change. Although other countries may act reciprocally toward the United States, they will not necessarily limit trade with one another. Geopolitical factors could also speed the unwinding of trade flows. A war over Taiwan, for example, could bring trade between the United States and China to a screeching halt. Nowadays, tariffs and border controls may slow down those flows. That would be hard, bad news for American power, which has been enhanced by the energy and the productivity of immigrants throughout its history, including during the last several decades. So, no crisis highlight the inescapability of interdependence better than climate change. Also talking about climate change. Scientists predict that climate change will have huge costs as global ice caps melt, coastal cities flood, heat waves intensify, and the weather patterns shift chaotically later in the century, something like that. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has been an important voice articulating the dangers of climate change, but unfortunately, Donald Trump is paying small attention to these kind of climate change issues nowadays. And as we all analyze, it is also deliberately undermining Washington's ability to address types of ecological globalization, such as climate change and pandemics, whose costs are potentially gargantuan. The COVID-19 pandemic in the United States killed over 1.2 million people. The Lancet has placed the worldwide death toll at about 18 million. COVID-19 circulated the world rapidly and was certainly a global phenomenon, fostered by travel that is an integral part of globalization. Issue of globalization. In other areas, interdependence remains a key source of American strength. Networks of professional interaction among scientists, for instance, have had a tremendous positive effect in speeding discoveries and innovation. So interdependence is a kind of mutual development to all the parties concerned in the international society. The Trump administration is also unwinding another key tool of American soft power, the country's espousal of liberal democratic values. This is very important, liberal democratic values. Especially during the last half century, the idea of human rights as a value has diffused around the world. After the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, democratic institutions and norms spread to much of Eastern Europe, including briefly to Russia, as well as to other parts of the world, notably Latin America, and gained some foothold in Africa. The wide appeal of democratic norms and of human rights has certainly contributed to the soft power of the United States. Autocratic governments resist what they see as an interference in their sovereign autonomy by groups supporting human rights, groups that are often based in the United States and backed by non-governmental government resources in the United States. So we think that there is no undoing global interdependence. It will continue as long as humans are mobile and invent new technologies of communication and transportation. Globalization issues will be gaining more and more weight. As South Korea is benefited by this kind of enhanced globalization. Now, the information revolution is transforming service-oriented economies. Billions of people carry a computer in their pocket, packed with an amount of information that would have filled a skyscraper 50 years ago. And world wars temporarily reversed economic globalization and disrupted the migration. But in the absence of a global warfare, and as long as technology continues its rapid advance, economic globalization will continue as well. Also, ecological globalization and global scientific activity are also likely to persist, and norms and information will continue to travel across borders. To rechannel and reshape globalization for the common good, state will have to coordinate. For such coordination to be effective, leaders will have to construct and maintain networks of connection, norms, and institutions. Those networks will have to construct and maintain networks of connection, norms, and institutions. And those networks will in turn benefit their central node, the United States, still economically, militarily, technologically, culturally most powerful country in the world, providing Washington with soft power. Unfortunately, the myopic focus of the second Trump administration, which is obsessed with coercive hard power, linked to the trade asymmetries and sanctions, is likely to erode their competitiveness rather than strengthen the US-led international order. Trump does not seem to grasp how American strength lies in interdependence. Instead of making America great again, he is making tragic bet on weaknesses. So this article carried on the Foreign Affairs June issue with the title of the end of American century, explaining by the international relational theory of power of interdependence. Robert Cohen and Joseph Nye criticized the Donald Trump administration's unilateral approaches, which destroys interdependence and which destroys soft power in creating more wealth and in making world countries, by the names of globalization, less and less productive, diminishing economic activities in the future. How about South Korea's options in the future, meeting these kind of challenges, especially created by the world hegemony country, the United States? How will South Korea deal with these kind of challenges and problems? International politics is defined by power. Without power, either economic power, military power, diplomatic power, soft power, anyway, cultural power, any country cannot implement their policy goals properly in the international arena. Like, we cannot do anything without money in domestic politics. So we have Korea-US alliance structures, which is a very, very valuable asset we have created during the last 8 years since the Korean War. We have to enhance Korea-US alliance, and by hanging all the more strongly to this kind of axis, Korea-US alliance, we should create more rooms to utilize, to take full advantage of China's, largest market, not abandoning this kind of benefit, but based on Korea-US alliance. This is very important. So, as a divided country, South Korea's first focus on security issues cannot be ignored. But rather, South Korea's economic interest will be more and more secured by more dependence on the United States, foreign policy. Otherwise, Korea-Japan-US alliance will be shaken, and the Chinese influential operations will be more successful, making South Korea as one of the typical countries that Chinese communist country has succeeded in influential operations to make South Korea's positions more tilting toward, Beijing. This is a very important period here in South Korea nowadays. In terms of foreign and security policy, we need to be more allied to the United States in basic principles. Then we make rooms to utilize those rooms to move into other countries like China, India, or other Southeast developing countries in the future. Today, I spoke in English for those Korean Americans who want to hear international politics and South Korean politics and the positions of South Koreans amid this kind of uncertainties and unpredictabilities which has been created by South Korean domestic politics. Many South Koreans are worried about the future of South Korean politics and destiny of South Korea. Such a democratic South Korea is in a critical crisis nowadays. Again, international politics is giving clear answer. We must keep Korea-US alliance as number one principle, as a strong axis to create more rooms to utilize other countries' positions in the future. Thank you. Have a nice night. I'll finish my diplomatic security commentating after introducing Joseph Nye and Robert Cohen's article, The End of Long American Century. Thank you so much.